Hello, friends. By the time you see this vlog, I will have been unmasked as the masked booktuber for the Battle of the Booktuber Challenge. When Danny messaged me to become the masked booktuber, I jumped on this opportunity so fast. The fact that I get to read some fun books that people have recommended to me, work behind the scenes during this awesome challenge that Danny has put forth, and also trick my friends, it's like the best of all the worlds. But it is currently January. It is much later by the time you see this video, but I need to read these 5 books in secret. No one can know I'm reading these books because they will guess who I am. So I cannot talk about these books. I have to read them in utter secret, and I need to start this vlog. So my goal is to read 1 book every single month. That will have me done in May. I need to be done by the end of June. That gives me a 1-month buffer. So if a month kind of goes awry, I can still have a month to get the final book done if I need to. I've decided to just do these books in order of how I know our championship booktubers, which I only know them by Booktuber 1, Booktuber 2, Booktuber 3, Booktuber 4, and Booktuber 5. So I'm going to start with the book given to me by Booktuber 1, and I do have a guess who all these booktubers are. For various reasons, I have narrowed it down to who I think they are. I don't know for sure. There's one that I'm pretty sure of, which is Leandra, because I just know Leandra's reading taste really well. Leandra, you are not Booktuber 1. I feel pretty strongly you're not Booktuber 1. But the book given to me by Booktuber 1 is The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. When I saw this on the list from Booktuber 1, I knew I was picking this up because this is a magical books book, and I love magical books. And honestly, how Booktuber 1 knew this is amazing to me because they got very little information about me, because obviously if we gave them too much information, they'd know it was me. So we had to be very sneaky in what we told them that I liked about books. And I did not mention my love of magical books, but I love magical books. I mean, I still talk about Inkblood Sister Scribe, and I read that a 1.5 years ago. So it just shows my love of books about books and books about magical books. So I will be reading this first. I'll bring you along with me. Let's see what I think. I am going to talk about this booktuber as Booktuber 1. However, I do think I know who it is, as I said. So let's jump in. Let's get started on reading the Book of Doors. And you are going to come with me through this video over the next 5 months as I read 5 different books. So this vlog, I'm going to look vastly different depending on as my hair grows, as I cut it again maybe, who knows? But this is where we're going to be starting with Booktuber 1, and I'm going to say it right now, I am pretty sure Booktuber 1 is Kirsten from The Reading Nymph. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. It'll be interesting to see if I get any or all of these right. But that's my guess who it is. But anyway, let's read this book. So I made it to the 33% point of Book of Doors. This book follows Cassie, and Cassie is working at a bookstore, and she has an older gentleman that comes into the bookstore near the end of the day. I think he's lonely. He likes to talk to Cassie about books, about his life, get a cup of coffee while she's closing up. One day he comes and he actually passes in the bookstore, and he leaves her with a note, his favorite copy of The Count of Monte Cristo and this book called The Book of Doors. Cassie takes them both home, and she opens up the Book of Doors to find out that this book can actually take her through doors anywhere. If she knows and can envision where she wants to go, she can just step through any door and it will take her there. And this is such a magical thing. And at first I was a bit confused at how her and her roommate were using the magical book, because instead of going to like amazing places that she could visit, she decided to just like shunt around Manhattan, even though she could just walk to those places. And that confused me. Like, why were we just going to such mundane places? Like, they were like, hey, let's go to our favorite sandwich shop. If I got a book of magical doors, I wouldn't be going to my sandwich shop down the street. So I was like, what are they doing? And it was kind of irritating me, to be honest. It was a little bit irritating. And then they did decide to like go to some other places. Like they went to Egypt, they went to Tokyo. And I was like, okay, that's nice. But like we were mostly told about it. We weren't really seeing it in the book. It was like, we went to Tokyo, then we went to here, then we went to here. And we weren't getting those adventures. And again, I was a little bit frustrated. Cut to, we are starting to find out that there are many magical books. This is the Book of Doors, but there's also the Book of Luck, the Book of Despair, the Book of Joy. There's lots of magical books. And a lot of people have not seen the Book of Doors in like centuries. It has been lost. Obviously, it's been with this older man. But, you know, the people who collect these books could not find it. So now that the Book of Doors has been found, a lot of people want the Book of Doors. And some of them are very sinister people, including a serial killer. Now that really got my attention because as much as the girls are not using it for any fun reason that I would use a magical book for, all these other people raised the stakes. Obviously, not necessarily in a good way. Like that also would not be what I would recommend using this magical book for, but like at least it raised the stakes on the book. There is also a man called Mr. Drummond, and he is a librarian of these magical books. And he is like, I will help Cassie know what to do with the magical book. And I will help her and show her the world of magical books. And I'm about to go see this magical book library, and I'm very invested in that. So I think this story, because I just started part 2, is really starting to pick up the pace. I think the first part was a little slow of them just like meandering around Manhattan through magical doors. And now we're going to start getting into some really exciting stuff happening. So I'm hoping that now that we've got a baseline of what's going on, we can really like amp up the speed of this book and like go and dive further into these magical books. So I made it to 66% of the Book of Doors, which puts me on page 262. And I think I'm going to fly through the rest of this book, honestly. I'm really enjoying this. As we got more into the book, I got more and more invested. Honestly, the only thing that I didn't love about the beginning was that I felt like they had this magical book and they were like squandering the use of it. And it was driving me crazy. I was like, why are you using it just to go down the street? You saw my update. You know that I felt this way about this. And even at the start of what I read since I last talked with you, they were making decisions, characters in this book, to keep other characters safe that were blatantly not going to keep them safe. I was like screaming at the book. I was like, that is not a good idea. That is not a good idea. That kind of annoyed me as well. But like overall, I'm really enjoying this book. And that was early on and really close to when I last talked with you. Since then, we really haven't had any of those moments of like, what are you doing? We haven't had any of those. This book does have some time travel in it, which I did not know going into this book. And I should have, because it is listed like on the Goodreads tags that it does have time travel. I just missed that little tidbit of information. And honestly, I don't typically always love a time travel book because time travel books do have a tendency to feel a bit repetitive to me if we're reliving the same timeline, like if we're having like Groundhog Day situations or seeing a lot of repetitive things happen. Luckily, that's not the case with this book. I'm actually finding the time travel part of this book the most interesting and the found family vibes of this book because we have different friendship groups and we have different even mentors in this book for our younger characters like Cassie and the people who, you know, gift her the Book of Doors at the very start of the book and also the people that are teaching her about the Book of Doors. And I really am enjoying the character focusedness of this book. This book does have plot, but it is very character focused. The plot is not fast paced. We are meandering through the plot, honestly, but we are focusing on the characters. And as a character focused reader, I'm not mad about that. I don't need a big, huge dynamic plot if you give me great characters and great character work. That's fine. I'm here all day for that. And I am getting that in this book. And I love seeing the connections that we're getting through the story with the time travel. We're seeing like little connections that maybe this character did then that will connect to something later. And to write a book that way is not easy. To make those connections work, you need to really think about that ahead of time and really plan that out. And I think the author did that really, 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 really well. I do think we could dive more into the magic of this book. As a fantasy reader, I think we have this amazing system of magical books. And I think we're really keeping that at arm's length. It is a part of the book. Obviously, it's the entire plot in some ways. But because this is a very character-focused book, we're not necessarily focused as much on the magic system. The magic system maybe is what is driving the plot that is here, but the main focus is on our characters and how they are interconnected and their relationships amongst each other. And I do think you could have had both in this book because these magical books and this magic system is really interesting, and I think you could have dived more into that. I think this book could have been longer and you could have dived more into that, but we didn't. And that's my only critique. Well, not my only one, because obviously I do think the characters made some odd decisions at the beginning of this book. But overall, I'm enjoying the book a lot and I'm enjoying my time with it. And I really want to see how it wraps up and ends. So I wanted to come talk with you now because I think the next time I'm going to talk with you is when I'm going to be finished this book. You're touching the couch. So I have officially finished the Book of Doors, and I will say the last third of this book was not necessarily to my taste. We started to do a lot of things. There was a lot of things happening, and they were happening at a clip, which was good to see the pace pick up, but I do think it highlighted the pacing issues of this book, that it was so slow getting to where we were trying to get to, and then we had to get so much done at the end. One thing I don't love about some books is when you are told something is happening and then maybe even 2 paragraphs later, you're told, never mind, magic things have happened that make that not have happened. And I'm okay to let that slide sometimes, but in this book, it was often in the end. Paragraph to paragraph, it was, yes, this is what's happening. No, wait, it's this. Yes, this. No, this. Yes, this. No, this. A lot of time it happens in thrillers with the twists being all over the place. And in this, it was due to magic, which is fun, but it was just too often. It was just too much of flipping back and forth to what was happening, what wasn't happening, what we thought was happening. No, never mind, it's this. And it made it hard to really even believe anything that was happening at the end of this book and really sink into the end of this book. And there were some things that I think should have impacted me more as a reader that just didn't. They didn't impact me because I wasn't as connected to the characters as I probably should have been to care about those things that are happening. And I still think that we could have dived more into this magic system. The magic system is so neat and these magical books are so interesting. And I feel like we're just touching the surface of all of it. It really reminded me of a book. And if you loved this book and you wanted this book to have a bit more plot and dive more into the magic, I would highly recommend The Cartographers. I read that a couple of years back and I really enjoyed it. And I think the magic system is similar-ish. That's maps, but it's similar-ish, but you dive much more deeply into the magic in that book. And I think I enjoy that style just a bit more than this one. So there was just some things about the end that for me personally, it did not work for. There were a lot of things that I think this book did well, though. I said in the last one, the connections in the timeline I thought was done really, really well. So overall, there were things I liked, things I didn't, and I think this book was really well written for what it was trying to do other than the pacing issues. So I'm going to give this a 3.5 star, and yeah, we're going to move on to Booktuber number 2. So for Booktuber number 2, the book I am going to be reading, I have it right here, is This Woven Kingdom by Tara Mafi. Now, I am almost positive I know who Booktuber number 2 is, and I'm going to lead into why. First of all, every one of the Booktubers gave me 3 books, and I had to pick from those 3 to decide what I was going to read. This is the one I decided to read. The 3 books in this list I really think were picked by Rainey Blue Reads, because I know from Danny that Rainey is somewhat suspecting that I am the mass booktuber, and I'm trying to lead them off my trail, honestly. And I think that the list that was sent was like books Rainey would have thought I would pick, if that makes any sense. Like, that was my mindset. It went right to that. And then the other day on Sprints, after I had already told Danny what books I was going to pick, so all of them knew what books I was going to pick, Rainey showed up in my Patreon Sprints in the comments and started talking about this book. I think trying to make me slip up. Rainey was reading this book at the time because they are allowed to recommend books that they haven't read yet. So I think Rainey, knowing about this fantasy romance, knowing that it might lean more political, decided to read it after, recommending it to the mass booktuber. Came into my sprint, started talking about it, and started to say that she thought it was a Brittany book. And it was a really funny time on Sprints because I had to basically lie my behind off that I didn't know anything about this book. Let's get started on booktuber number 2. So this morning I read 36% of this Woven Kingdom, which gets me to the start of chapter 15, I believe. Yes, the start of chapter 15, page 171. And can we just talk about how beautiful these chapter pages are? They are stunning and gorgeous. And this book is reading very fast. I mean, in a morning, I read almost, over a third of this book. So it's reading very, very quickly. In this book, we follow Eliza, and Eliza is a djinn who is kind of secretly living in this kingdom, and not because she's a djinn, because djinns are allowed to live in this kingdom. And truly, I did not find out why until about 1 chapter ago, which is pretty late in this story. So I'm going to not talk about why she's hidden. The back of the book does say she's hidden, but again, it doesn't say why, because it does come to knowledge to us as readers pretty late in the story. But anyway, she's been hidden, and she is currently living as a maid. And her employers are not the best, truly. They really overwork her, knowing that she is a djinn and knowing that she is magical and can work harder than a human, can work past what a human body can endure. And they are quite cruel to her. But she also wants to be a seamstress, and she's working on the side to build up her seamstress business. And we see her actually selling a ball gown at the start of this and getting a lot of money and starting to build past her station in this book at the start of it. We also follow Cameron, who is the prince going to succeed as king in this land. And he's coming back after being at war for some time. And he sees Eliza across a crowded, basically market, courtyard, what have you. He sees her, and he sees her being attacked by a homeless boy and steps in to that situation and becomes intrigued with her and really wants to know more about her and starts to kind of look into her past, look into who she is, what she is, and all this stuff. And it kind of brings them together in this book at this point. I will say this book is based off Persian mythology, which I don't know that mythology inspired what it's inspired by. But I will say it does have a Cinderella vibe, big time Cinderella vibes. Again, maid cleaning for this horrible land, the prince that she might fall in love with. Right now they're getting ready for a ball because he needs to get married because his grandfather, who is the current king, his father has died in the past. So he is going to take the throne from his grandfather, is dying, and he needs to have him married before he takes the throne so that the succession can continue on. So they're about to have this big ball, and it really, really, really gives Cinderella vibes, which I love a retelling, a fairy tale. This is, again, a retelling of a Persian mythology, but I would assume that somehow those two stories have kind of blended together over time. That happens a lot with fairy tales in one, place can sometimes blend into another, and that's how these things happen. So anyway, the only thing that I'm not loving about this book at this time is that the timeline at times repeats itself. So we will swap between both perspectives. We'll be with Eliza and then we will be with Cameron. And there are times where we swap mid plot point, in the timeline. And instead of starting the new POV from the point in the timeline we're at, we rewind and we start even, an hour earlier or 30 minutes earlier, or even just minutes earlier from where we left off in the other person's POV. And I don't love that. I don't like when authors do that. It is a big, big pet peeve of mine. Just pick up the story from where you left us. So that is my only critique at this point in time. I'm hoping that as we have our characters come together and spend more time in the same vicinity, we see that less often and we just pick up from where we left off in the plot. Hopefully. That's, again, my only critique of this book at this point. So overall, I'm really enjoying it and I'm excited to continue. So I'm going to go do that. So I have made it to 70% of this Woven Kingdom. I meant to come around the 66% point, and then I needed to finish the chapter. And by the time I finished the chapter, it was at 70%. And honestly, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with this book. I'm struggling to care about the characters and to care about the story. First of all, there's not much plot happening. We're really dancing around the plot. It almost feels like a prequel to what is going to happen in the rest of the books in the series. We're not diving into much of it. We're seeing our prince kind of do princey things, but again, we're mostly just told about it. We're not really seeing a lot of it. We're seeing Annalisa doing maid things, doing, making dresses because she is a seamstress as well, and we're seeing her do those things. We're not diving into what is really going on in this book and why these two characters are important. There's talks of things and we're really skirting around it. And it really feels like we're setting up the next book. But there's nothing in this book, which is a little bit frustrating for me. There was a point almost 100 pages ago, I put a tab in it where we did get some information. And I thought, oh, great. We're going to dive into the plot now. We're really going to dive in. This is where it kind of kicks up and we're going to go. And we didn't. We had one little chapter of something kind of being told to us. And then we just left it. And I really needed us to follow that. And we didn't. And the characters are fine. I like them mostly. I feel like there's not much fantasy in this book other than the fact that she's a djinn, but there's no magic really involved. We see her magic every once in a while for just a couple of paragraphs, maybe 3 pages overall in the 200 and some pages I've read. 300 pages I've read. How many pages have I read? That's a good question. 339. The magic is such an afterthought to the book. And again, we're not getting a lot of plot. So what is pulling us in? And for me, it's not the romance. I don't really care for this romance, to be honest. It feels very insta-lovey. They have barely seen each other. They've barely been in the same place for more than a handful of minutes. And we're supposed to be really rooting for their romance. And I'm like, what? So I'm not liking the plot because there isn't much of it. I'm not liking the characters because they're just fine. I'm not liking the romance because it's super insta-lovey and doesn't really have anything pulling me in. And also, we do have some moments of kind of retelling the same instance from a different timeline. I mentioned this, or not from a different timeline, from a different perspective. I mentioned this in my last update, so I'm not going to go into it again. But that almost makes me not like the writing style. So I'm struggling. I'm really, really struggling with this book. I am going to finish because it's not going to take me very long. It does read very quickly. So even though I have 30%, I think that's only going to be about an hour and a half of reading. So I am going to finish out the book. Maybe the plot will pick up near the end. Usually the last 100-ish pages of a fantasy novel is very plot heavy. So maybe that will help me a little bit like the book overall, if I really like the ending, we shall see. But right now, I'm having a hard time with this one. It's definitely not a book that has a lot of the elements in it that make me like a fantasy romance. It's missing a lot of those elements that I really need. A strong magic system, really good characters. I like to see banter. These characters really don't have banter. It doesn't have the things I need for a really good fantasy romance, unfortunately. So I have finished this Woven Kingdom, and nothing in the last 30% of this book changed my mind on anything that I was feeling when I last chatted with you. So I'm not going to give much more of an update on actually why I wasn't enjoying this, because I think I really was quite articulate in the things that weren't working for me in the last update, and there's really no reason to harp on that. I am going to give this 2 stars. This is not a book for me. I did not enjoy it. I'm glad it's done, and I'm glad to move on to another book. And we are going to move on to another booktuber, which is booktuber number 3. And for booktuber number 3, I'm pretty sure I know who this is. I'm pretty sure it's Victoria. Why I think this is Victoria is because when I did some internet investigating for these books and who I thought recommended these books, Victoria has a wrap-up video with this book in the thumbnail. And when I went and watched that video, she was singing the praises of this book. So I'm pretty sure Victoria is the one who recommended it to me, and I'm quite excited to try this book, and it is The Dark Rise. I actually didn't know that much about this book when it came in as a recommendation, but when I was reading the synopsis, it really did sound like a book that I would enjoy. But since I didn't really know much about this book until I was looking it up because of getting it to read it for this, I'm gonna wait and give you a synopsis of it once I've read a little bit of it, because really all I know is the tiny blurb on the back and like the little tags Goodreads mentioned and not much else. So I will come back and chat with you once I've read a little bit of this here shortly. Do we have our first 5-star of Battle of the Booktuber for me? I think we might. I have already read 50% of this book, and I did plan on talking to you before that, but I was so intrigued in the story and so fallen down a rabbit hole of this story that I slightly forgot how far I was. And I wasn't paying attention to how far I was. I was just reading and I was enjoying it and I was having fun. And that's what you want from a book. This book has so many things that make me just love it so much. So let me tell you a little bit about this book first, and then I'll say kind of what I'm liking about it, or I'll gush as I tell you, either way. So in this book, we follow Will, and Will at the start of this book is living on the docks, and he is finding himself kind of on the run, but not really sure why. His mother has recently perished, and she basically told him he was unsafe, and he's starting to find out why that is. He gets captured by a group of people, gets thrown into the bottom of a boat, and is saved from the people who take him by a little girl, she's a teenage girl, named Violet. They are both quite young in this book. They are, young adults and teenagers. And Violet is the sister of one of the people who captured Will, and she's trying to figure out why her brother has captured Will, what is going on, and both of them are really trying to figure out how they're being pulled into what is happening. And what is happening is that the Dark King, which is kind of this mythical dark lord that very few people know about, is trying to be raised from basically the dead to rule over London, because this is an urban fantasy. And Simon, who is a powerful man in London at this time, is trying to collect artifacts to raise him from the dead and to raise his henchmen from the dead. And her brother Tom is a part of this organization with Simon. There's also a other side, people for light and light magic, who have always been tasked, and it's an organization called the Stewarts, and they have always been tasked with preventing this from happening, preventing this Dark King from being raised and the ruin that would come from that. So the Stewarts come, they scoop up Will and Violet, and they start, explaining all of what I just told you to Will and Violet. And Will and Violet need to find out why they are a part of this. Like, how are they a part of this anyway? Like, how did we get here? What is our piece in all of this? And how are we going to stop this Dark King from being raised. And honestly, the magic is great. I love this idea of like gathering these artifacts or trying to prevent the gathering of these artifacts. And there are some artifacts that are for good as well to help them, keep this from happening. And I'm really enjoying the facets of this. I also feel like it really does have some found family vibes with Will and Violet, also within the Stewart organization. You can definitely see how it is set up to become a family when you are called to being a Stewart, and how you're kind of brought into this larger family of people trying to prevent this horrible thing from happening. We have ancient writings that nobody can read, but certain people can all of a sudden read it because, there's some chosen one things happening, and I'm loving it. I love when there's two sides. I do love this like ancient magic system that's happening. I love a found family, and just like there's nothing about this that I'm not enjoying, and I'm just falling into this story so fast, and I'm adoring it. And I just want to know how it ends, even though there is a sequel to this, and I may need to get my hands on the sequel sooner rather than later, because truly, if this leaves on a cliffhanger, I'm going to need to know what happens next. Very early on, as I was reading this, it was giving me 5-star energy. It has never stopped giving me 5-star energy. Something would really have to go awry at the end of this to no longer give me 5-star energy. Like this is barreling towards a 5-star very, very, very quickly. And truly, I'm going to stop talking to you so that I can go finish this book, because I put it down just to talk to you. And I'm going to immediately pick it right back up as soon as we stop here, because I must know where we're going. I must read the rest of this book immediately. This is the best fantasy book that I have read this year. You are seeing this much in the future from when I read this, but it is currently April, and this is the best fantasy book I have read in the first 4 months of the year, and is definitely a potential for best books of the year. I love this book with my whole heart and being. I need to get the sequel sooner rather than later, but like I also might wait until after this video goes up so that I can read it kind of in real time and actually gush about it in real time, because I'm not getting to do that with this one. And again, it could be best books of the year, so like I want to gush about it. The layers of this magic system, it is so layered, it is so complex. And you are finding out things just every, 3 or 4 chapters, you unlock a new layer. And as you unlock those layers, you find out more things. And what you kind of thought we were leading to is not necessarily what we were leading to every instance. And you just keep uncovering this magic system. And it is so integral. It is so layered. It is so well done. And it is completely captivating. The character work is top tier. It is top tier character work. You are going to care about all of our main characters. You are going to want to know what they're going to do to fix the problems they found themselves in, to continue forward in what they need to be doing. And you are not going to want to put this book down. I definitely didn't. We do get a lot of answers in this book, so it doesn't necessarily leave you on like this big cliffhanger, but there are definitely a lot of answers that I still do not have that I know I will find out as I read the series. And I think that's a really great way for a first book to be. You need to give me some answers so that I feel like this book is a complete book of its own. But you also need to leave me with enough questions to make me want to immediately dive into the sequel, which I really, really do. And if I could talk about this in live, like at the time of reading it, to you as the public, I would be diving into the next one right away. But I think I'm going to hold off till this video comes out and everyone knows that I'm the Masked Booktuber, and then dive into the sequel of this like right away. So if it's not clear by how I'm talking, I am going to give this 5 stars. Thank you so much, Booktuber 3 or Victoria, which I am pretty sure it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you for getting me to read this book. It was such a pleasant and fun and fabulous reading experience. Wonderful book recommendation. But that means we are on to Booktuber number 4, which if I am wrong about the identity of Booktuber number 4, I will be shocked. This is the one that I was the most sure about. And it makes sense because I know this booktuber very, very well. So the recommendations given to me really matched one specific booktuber to a T, and that is Leandra the TBR0. If Leandra is not booktuber number 4, I will be shocked. The book that I will be reading that has been recommended to me by booktuber number 4 is The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich. I know that Leandra has read this book. I know that this book made Leandra cry, so I expect to cry. Especially since I am known to have a book cry from time to time. Actually, often I am a book crier. So I'm going into this one kind of expecting an emotional experience. This is also not very long, so I don't think this one is going to take very long. I don't know if the font's small, but like the book is not a long book. It's only 300 pages. So I do appreciate being given a short novel that I can like knock out really quickly. So I have made it to 50% of The Measure, which puts me about 175 pages through this book. And this book is so thought-provoking. And it's a dystopian narrative. I didn't really know for sure what this was when I went in. I kind of knew the premise, but now I have a bit more of an idea. One day, every person in the world who is 22 years of age and over wakes up to a box on their doorstep. If they're homeless, it's wherever they rested their head at night. And they get this box. In this box is a string, and the length of the string determines the length of your life. And what does that make you do if you know that you are going to have a shorter life or a longer life? How does society process this? Is what we look at throughout this book. How do different governments process this knowledge and go forward knowing the things that they know? And do they oppress people who have shorter strings? It's a very heavy book. It is very, very thought-provoking. People under the age of 22 do not get a box that day. However, they get one on their 22nd birthday. Nobody knows where these boxes are coming from. I don't know if I ever find out. Honestly, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people trying to figure out where the boxes and the strings came from. They seem to be more worried about what to do about the strings. Some governments have said you can't open your box, you just can't know. But mostly we are following the American system and what they choose to do about this box. We will mention other countries very offhandedly, but this story is very much set in America and following 8 different people in the United States during this time of dystopianness in the world. And we are switching perspectives often. Like some of these chapters are only like 1 to 2 pages long. And that's actually really interesting because recently I was talking to a few different booktubers about whether or not we like this fast switching of perspectives. And typically I would say, no, I don't really like that. I find it hard to settle into each character and get to know their motivations when we're flipping so often. But I do think that if it's done with intentionality and it is done very, very well, it does work. And in this case, I do think it does work, and I do think it's written very well. And actually, the moving around really creates the sense of unease that these characters are feeling because their whole worlds are in upheaval. And we follow some people with long strings, some people with short strings, some people who love people with short strings and how that, rocks your world. And we feel the upheaval that these characters are feeling. And I think the switching around helps us also feel that way. I am really enjoying this book. However, I'm not sure this is the best time for me to be reading this book. But you know what? It is not necessarily detracting, and I'll explain why I'm thinking it's not the best time. And that's because I'm not an American, I'm Canadian. But obviously, right now, in the current political climate that we're in, we are inundated with politics of all the countries, politics everywhere, but especially American politics. And this dives very deeply into American politics. We are following someone who's trying to run for president, one of our perspectives, some people in the army, and we are really diving into how the American political climate would kind of navigate these choices really specifically. And I am finding that even though this is a dystopian book, if you took away the strings part of this book, it looks very much like what we're seeing on the news, very much like what we're seeing when we look outside. And although that is adding to me also feeling unsettled while reading this and making it a very immersive read, I don't necessarily know if it's making me enjoy my experience of reading it, if that makes sense. It feels a little bit too close to the current climate, and when the dystopian books are starting to feel like the current climate, it makes you feel unsettled. However, that does make it more thought-provoking, so I'm of two minds with that, of it is saying something really, really important, and I think if you look at the underlying narrative, you are getting something very important from this book, as you tend to with dystopian novels. However, I feel a little bit exhausted reading it because it is so much like if I was just to turn on the TV to a news station right now. Obviously, there are some differences, but I am finding it a little bit mentally taxing just because I do tend to read for escapism. However, I do really like a commentary in a book. So, you know, those two things don't necessarily always align, but here we are. That's just how I'm feeling with this book specifically. I really am enjoying what it's trying to say. I'm really intrigued in where we're going, but I do find it exhausting at times. I'm really interested to see how we wrap up this book, to be honest, because right now everything feels very bleak. It feels very heavy. And I'm wondering where we're going to go in the end, if we're going to leave it in a very bleak state, or will there be a little glimmer of hope that we see through this book? I don't know. I'm not sure, honestly. So we'll find out as we go. I'm not going to take long to read the rest of this book because it does read really fast with the short chapters. Obviously, anytime there's short chapters, you're like, you know, flying through a book because it's just 1-2 pages and you're done a chapter. And then you're like, well, I'll just read one more. I'll just read one more. I'll just read one more. And the book is done. So it is reading very fast, but I just don't know how we're going to close out this book. The only book that I think I could compare this to is They Both Die in the End. The system is very similar. It's not exactly the same. And I do think I liked They Both Die in the End a little bit better at this point in time. I may change my mind as we go, but if you liked this and haven't read that one, I would recommend. If you liked that one and want something kind of similar, maybe a little bit heavier, then I would recommend this. So, you know, they're similar books, they're similar ideas. What would you do if you knew you were about to die or that your life would be short? And if you did those things, is that actually what leads to your early demise? What I would love to know is how many times Nikki Ehrlich has watched the musical Rent. The reason being is the entire last 100 pages, 150 pages of this book, I just kept wanting to sing Seasons of Love. If you don't know that song, I'm sorry that you don't know the song. It's a great song. It's from the musical Rent. I'm a big musical listener, and basically it's 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a life? How do you measure it? Do you measure it with time, length of life, or do you measure it with the quality of what you did with the time that you had? And that is the entire essence of this book. And again, the song will be, did you measure it with love? Did you measure it with the relationships that you had and what you left in the world? And that is the essential underlying narrative of this book. And I spoke about that the last time I chatted with you, but even the more I read it, the more I saw how we were going to wrap it up, how we were going to leave it with some hope at the end of this. Because with dystopian narratives, you don't always have a lot of hope at the end. Because you are trying to say something about the state of the world or the state that the world could potentially go if, you know, certain things were to happen. There is essentially a heaviness to this book. And I was talking about that in the last one as well. And that's very common in dystopian books. But this one, for the last 150 pages, I could really see how the author was going to impart a little bit of hope in showing that the length of your life is not the main measure of your life, and how we kind of go about that in this book. I do think that because this is set in New York and during a primary campaign for most of this book for a party to pick who they are going to put forward as a president. There is a lot that did make it feel kind of too close to home at times, too close to the current political climates that we're seeing at the time of this. We are, coming out of an American political campaign. We are just coming out of a Canadian one as well. So I just had a political race while I was reading this happening as well. So there was a little bit that kind of made this a little too close, but it still really said something and really made a point and really hit with the point it was trying to make. I did compare it to another book, and I do think that kind of did detract from this a little bit for me because I was constantly comparing it to They Both Die in the End. And when you are reading two books that are extremely, extremely similar, you do naturally compare them and you will naturally say one of them did it better. For me, They Both Die in the End was a 5-star. This one I'm going to give a 4. It was still a really, really good book. Very, very strong. And I think maybe had I read this one first, maybe I would have liked it a bit more. I can't say. I can only live my truth in what I read now. Again, I do think the time in which I'm reading it also may have been a factor. But overall, it was still a really great book, and I am really glad I read it. And I do think some of the commentary and some of the thoughts of this book will stick with me for a long, long time, and I will think about it. And this will be a book that I ponder for a while. With that, though, I have now finished my 4th book for Battle of the Booktuber, and that means I only have one more left. Booktuber number 5, which by process of elimination, we have Sam, if I am right with all my other choices. It was a hard one to kind of choose who gave this to me, so I did somewhat do this as, okay, let's figure out the other 4 and then I'll know who gave me this. So Sam, thank you for giving me this because this book was on my Goodreads TBR. This was a book I'm very excited about reading. It is another magical book about books, and it is The Binding by Bridget Collins. This book I, again, have had on my sights for a while because I do like a magical book about books. This cover, need I say more? But basically, it follows a bookbinder's apprentice who can bind your secrets so that you can hide your secrets or that you can forget your secrets. Basically, that's the concept. The back tells me very little, but that is the main concept of this book. I'll read a little bit and tell you a bit more when I come back, but it's magical, book about books, pretty cover. This writing style is so me. This style of telling a story, just instantly, I was so engrossed in how the author was writing the story and just like the actual writing style of the book. So immediately that got my attention. In this book, we follow Emmett. And Emmett, at the start of this book, is on his family's farm. He has just recently suffered a pretty serious illness, and they don't really know what this illness is. Well, at least Emmett doesn't. His family seems to have a little bit more information, and he is invited by a woman in the community who is a binder to come be her apprentice because the illness that he did have was bookbinders or binder's fever. And the binders have magic, and they can take someone's memories and bind it into a book so that the person no longer has that memory. And we do see some instances of why people might want to get rid of a memory. Usually it's a bad memory, a painful memory, and they come and give it willingly. Eventually, we do see kind of some ways in which this power is used not in a good way, used by maybe powerful men to help some people forget something that was done to them, to help them continue to do the things they should not do, to do horrible things, to victimize more people. So we see both reasons of why someone might want to lose their memories for a good reason to help them kind of move forward from something. But even then, we have to question, is that the best way to move on from something, just to forget about it? Or again, a much more sinister reason for why someone would bind up their memories. And Emmett is still trying to figure out if he even thinks this is a good thing to do at all. And yes, he has this power, but should he use it? And we're trying to kind of sort through that through this book. And I really find the commentary around the magic system, because that is the magic system that we're looking at, is really complex. The plot is not complex. There actually isn't that much plot to this book. This is definitely a very character-focused book. We're focusing on Emmett, the binders that he's learning from to some extent, and the people coming to him with memories or being forced to have their memories taken in some instances. So we're focusing on like little snippets of some side characters' lives to get the idea of why a memory might want to be bound or, again, be forced to be bound. And I do think there's a little bit of a mystery in Emmett's background. It is even on the synopsis, and we do know about it pretty early on in the book, that Emmett has a volume with his name on it, which means at some point in his life, he also surrendered a memory, but obviously he doesn't know what that memory is because it was surrendered and made into a book. And I'm really interested to see what that turns into as we go through the book, because there is another side character who we meet very early on in the book as well, who seems to know Emmett somehow, some way. And I think it's connected to this lost memory of Emmett's, because I don't know the context yet, but it's very obvious that I'm missing the context because of this lost memory. So I'm interested to see kind of how that plays out throughout the book too, while we also continue our discussion around this magic system and the efficacy, is that what I'm talking about? The ethicalness, that's what I mean. If I might be using the wrong word. Anyway, around this type of magic. I just finished part 1. I'm about to dive into part 2, so I figured that would be a good time to come talk to you. That puts me at 40% of the book, and there are 3 parts to this book. So that might be exactly when I do my updates for this book, because I do think we're going to be changing how the story goes with each part. That seems to be what's going to be happening. I can definitely see a shift going into part 2. And I don't know if our discussions are going to be really different. I don't know. With a character-focused book like this, where it's not necessarily wholeheartedly plot-focused, you can really dive into a lot of commentary and really dive into different aspects throughout each part. So we'll see how the book goes. But right now, I am really, really intrigued with what we're kind of seeing in this book. And again, the writing style, so me. So we are ending this battle of the Booktuber on a little bit of a sad note with a DNF. I got almost to the end of part 2, and the more I was thinking about it, I was getting more and more frustrated the more we read this book. Because again, I like a lot of things about this book. I really like the writing style. Part 2, we abandoned what we were talking about in part 1, and that is part of the reason I was so frustrated. At the end of part 1, we have pretty well-described memory of a significant SA moment and a violence towards women moment. And it is very much shown. Not all of it, but there's enough of it that you definitely get the heaviness of what has happened to this woman in this book. And her memory is being bound. And we're reliving the memory as that's happening. And immediately part 1 ends. And we jump to before any of this had ever happened, before Emmett finds out he's a binder, before anything, and we find out his memory, that again, we knew he had a memory bound. And that is a love story. And that love story felt such sharp contrast to the moment we just had, and it felt like a completely different book. And the love story in and of itself, I was really liking the love story, but there were just some scenes around some women in this book, violence towards women in this book. And there were just some things that it just felt really in sharp contrast. And it just felt like it wasn't being handled properly for me to get behind it. And I was a little bit frustrated that we weren't combating against it and that we weren't looking more into whether this magic system is ethical. We really abandoned that. I talked about that. I thought that's where we were going and we just stopped. And we had this love story. And again, the love story in and of itself is a really beautiful love story, which is why I'm frustrated. There's so much about this book that is good. But then there's these moments where I'm like, why is this in here in such stark detail? It feels sensationalized. And we all know I do not appreciate sensationalization in a book for no reason when there's just no purpose for it. And I thought when I saw that at the end of part 1, there was a purpose and we were going to really look into it and combat how this magic system kind of created this horrible thing that was happening. And we never did. And we're now like hundreds of pages later. The romance in this is a queer relationship. It's a male-male romance. And again, I really, really liked the romance. I was really rooting for this couple. This book is historical and it is set during a time where this society deems that to be unacceptable. And there's a lot of homophobic people around our main 2 characters. And that's hard to read, obviously, because you are rooting for this couple and people are just being horrible. And so please, know that that's also a trigger in this book. So we have SA as a trigger. We have homophobia as a trigger. This book should really have a trigger warning page. I don't think it does. If it does, I missed it. I'm going to double check actually. Although to be honest, this was published prior to trigger warnings being more commonplace in a book, but I do think it really needed one. But on top of that, I just don't think it's handling these really, really heavy topics well. I don't think it's handling it well. So the writing style I really like, the romance I really like, the magic in and of itself, the idea, the concept, I was really liking, but the execution and kind of the callousness to which we are having some of the scenes in this book is just not sitting right with me. So I've just decided to DNF the book. There is just not enough pushback on these things that are happening. There needs to be pushback on this magic system, how it is creating this systematic violence towards women. There needs to be pushback. There's not. There needs to be pushback on this homophobia. And there isn't from what I have seen so far. And I mean, it could happen in the second, 100 pages. Is there 100 pages left in this book? There's about 100 and I'm going to say 60 pages left of this book. So I'm not saying that there isn't at all, but I'm saying I'm unwilling to wait around to find out on the off chance that there isn't. Also, I did kind of look at Goodreads and there were a lot of people in the 3 and under star category that were leading me to believe that there isn't as much pushback as I would require to justify it being in the book. So anyway, that's just me. We're gonna DNF here on this last one, unfortunately. But yeah, that's where we're gonna end this mass booktuber experience. A huge thank you to Danny for letting me be the mass booktuber. I had such a fun time doing this and kind of like tricking my friends into not knowing it's me. And I really, really enjoyed it. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, can you leave a drama mask emoji down in the description box if you have nothing else to say, just to let me know that you were here. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.